One man, one woman, one American, one vote. That's what the writers of our Constitution put in the Constitution, not one corporation, one vote. What I hear on the Senate floor today and yesterday from those candidates who seem to rely on corporate money, who are the beneficiaries of a showering of not thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions, but tens of millions of dollars, candidates that benefit from the showering of tens of millions of dollars for their campaigns. What they're saying on this Senate floor is almost laughable. It would be laughable if it weren't so serious. It would be laughable if it didn't contribute to the corruption of this institution, of this government that we are so proud of the people, by the people, for the people. One man, one woman, one American, one vote. With Citizens United, with McCutcheon, the Supreme Court effectively ruled the more money you have, the more influence you have over our democracy. When I hear people on the other side, again, those who are beneficiaries of the millions, of the tens of millions of corporate dollars, often Wall Street, often oil companies, often big drug companies, often big tobacco companies, when they come to the floor and plead, they're pleading in many ways, that the supporters of this constitutional amendment are restricting the right to free speech. I agree that whether it's the Koch brothers, whether it's the big tobacco executives, they should get one vote. But when they can spend millions and millions of dollars and shower some of my colleagues with this kind of corporate money to get their way. We know what's happened in this country. We know for the richest 1% of people in this country that incomes have grown and grown, gone up and up and up. We know for the broad middle, for the bottom 90%, for the middle, that for the great majority of people in this country, their wages have been flat. No, they've actually been worse than flat over the last 20 years. The wealthy are getting extraordinarily wealthy, extraordinarily wealthier. The middle class, even sort of the upper middle class, let alone people who are working minimum wage jobs or making $15 an hour, their wages have been stagnant or worse. One of the reasons for that, Madam President, the presiding officer from Massachusetts has spoken out nationally about this over and over again. One of the reasons that wages have been flat in this country, and the rich are getting richer and richer and richer and richer, is the corruption of big money in our political system. I mean, I know how it works. In my race for the re-election in 2012, and I'm not complaining about this, as my wife's book publisher said, no whining on the yacht. If you get to be in the U.S. Senate, don't complain. But, Madam President, I also understand that when they spent $42 million against me in my campaign, I'm a big boy, I can take it, but it was oil money, it was tobacco money, it was Wall Street money, it was mostly out-of-state money, it was money from some of the richest people in the United States of America. What did they want? They didn't dislike me personally, I assume. Maybe they did, I don't really care. But what it was really about is they wanted whether they wanted whether the person came from Troy, Ohio, or Troy, Michigan, or Troy, New York. They wanted a politician in office from Ohio, as they wanted in Massachusetts, as they want this year in New Hampshire, as they want this year in Arkansas, as they want this year in Kansas, as they want this year in North Carolina, in Louisiana, and Alaska, and Colorado. They want a lapdog. They want somebody that will go to the well and vote with big tobacco, and go to the well and vote for Wall Street, and go to the well and vote for oil companies. And, that's what they'll get if we continue this corrupt way of campaign finance. The presiding officer remembers after we passed the Dodd-Frank legislation in this Congress back 4 years ago when she was working to establish a consumer protection agency. And after the vote on Dodd-Frank, do you remember what the leading financial services lobbyist in this town said? The president signed the bill. Within an hour or two, at least the same day, the lobbyist said, well, folks, it's halftime. What'd that mean? He wasn't talking about the NFL. He was talking about, well, we lost in Congress. They actually passed a bill that Wall Street wasn't wild about. They actually passed a bill that the largest financial institutions were not particularly happy about, but they knew they could use their lobbying, and they have thousands of lobbyists in this town. They have a number of lobbyists for every member of Congress. They knew they could use their lobbying force. They knew they could use the politicians that they had, I won't say were people here are bought, but you might suggest they're on a long-term lease in some cases. They were suggesting, they knew that just the threat of spending money. So you cast a vote in this institution next week, say, on a controversial issue. You know what you know? You know a couple things. You know you should do the right thing. You know what your constituents back in Florida or Massachusetts or Ohio are saying, but you also know one other thing. You know if you cast the vote that Wall Street might not like, if you cast a vote that big tobacco might not like, if you cast a vote that big oil companies might not like, you know what's going to happen? What's in your mind? That they're going to come to your state in the next election and spend 10 or 20 or 30 or $40 million. I had $42 million to $40 million spent against me because I don't do what Wall Street wants. I don't do what big tobacco wants. I don't do what the oil industry wants. So, of course, they're going to come after me. They fell short in 2012, not by much, but they fell short. But you know they'll do it again. You know every time we cast a vote, they're keeping a scorecard, and they think, well, we like what that senator did. We'll help him or her, usually him in that case. We don't like what she did. We don't like what he did, so we may be looking out to spend this kind of money. One man, one woman, one American, one vote. Not one corporation, one vote. Fortune 500 companies straddle the globe. They reap billions of dollars in profits. American corporations are at their most profitable time, perhaps in their history, sitting on tens, hundreds of billions of dollars of profit. It doesn't take a PhD in math to understand it. They spend a small micro fraction of the money they're making to protect those profits. How do they do it? They come to Ohio, they come to Massachusetts, they come to Florida, they come anywhere in the country, and they spend millions, they spend tens of millions to protect themselves on behalf of Wall Street, on behalf of big oil, on behalf of these big tobacco companies. It's all pretty simple. One man, one woman, one America, one vote. Citizens United and McCutcheon made clear there's now an entry fee for participating in our democracy. That's why I support the constitutional amendment proposed by Senator Udall that curbs unlimited campaign spending. One man, one woman, one American. This amendment grants Congress the authority to regulate and limit the raising and spending of money. We're not shutting anybody off. Anybody can still give fairly significant amounts of money. But we do know, do the math here, Madam President. After the McCutcheon decision, donors can now contribute up to $3.6 million in an election cycle. $3.6 million. I don't know for sure, because I have not met most of the 300 million people in our country, but I don't think there's all that many that have the wherewithal financially to contribute $3.6 million. But I also know this, because my staff did the math on this one, I acknowledge. The average person making a minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, and I parenthetically, the same people that love McCutcheon, then love the millions of dollars spent showered on us from Wall Street or against us from Wall Street, from big tobacco, from big oil. Those same people are stopping the minimum wage from being increased. The minimum wage is at its lowest level in buying power since 1968. It's been stuck at $7.25 an hour. Back in the era of bipartisanship on the minimum wage, we actually passed one in 2007, my first year in the Senate, signed by Republican President Bush. Those days seem to be past, but think about the math here. $7.25 an hour, you're allowed to give $3.6 million in an election cycle under the McCutcheon decision, a decision passed by corporations that seem to, pushed by corporations and handed down by a Supreme Court that says corporations are people too, more or less. For a minimum wage worker, it would take 239 years working full-time, 239 years, making $7.25 an hour to make $3.6 million, and then they'd have to give it all away in that election cycle to be able to compete with the oil companies and the drug companies and big tobacco and Wall Street. So, Madam President, this is pretty clear. We can change this. And again, back to the arguments of the other side, they're laughable at home. I don't think I know anybody that thinks it's okay that we're allowing somebody to come in and spin, except for colleagues, whom I like. I mean, most of the people on the other side of this issue, I like them personally, but I don't know very many people, unless they're in Washington, unless they have a stake in this system. I just don't know people that think it's a great idea to let people spend $3.6 million, because they're not spending it out of their charitable whims. They're spending it because they want their people, their water boys, their water girls for the drug companies, the water boys and the water girls for Wall Street, the water boys and the water girls for big tobacco. They want those people elected, not people that will stand up to those interest groups and do the right thing. To restore voters' faith in the political system, to ensure voters that their voices are being heard, one man, one woman, one American, one vote. That's what we stand for. Those are our values. That's why this is an important issue. Madam President, I yield the floor.